floor is yours. All right. Is my presentation visible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Bonono, and good afternoon to all my advisors and also the examiners. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Ida Fauzia. In this very special occasion, I would like to present the result of my research with the title Indonesian Medical Workers Motivation and Strategies in Learning English During the Pandemic. The purpose of this presentation is to give you a picture about my research focusing on the Indonesian medical workers' motivation and strategies in learning English during the pandemic. This motivation will be divided into 4 parts. So the first, I'm going to talk about the introduction and then the research method. And then the next, I will present the research findings and discussion. And the last is conclusion and suggestions. Now, let me start with the first part of this presentation. So let me start with pointing out the need of mastering English to many professions, and that also includes for medical workers. Based on the previous studies, it is concluded that having a good English proficiency in medical setting is very important. They use it for communication and then also for scientific purposes in either academic or professional settings. So in order to achieve good proficiency in English, there are some factors. 2 of those factors are motivations and learning strategies. And there have been some research related to motivations and also learning strategies. It's either in the students in general or for workers. Take one example, the one by these researchers. So they find that even when these medical students are in their university level, they already perceive the importance of English for their future careers. Meanwhile, learning strategies also play a big role for the learner's independence and how they manage their learning. And because of the situation of pandemic, there might be some changes. Recent evidence suggests that the pandemic has influenced the learner's learning motivation and strategies. So I took example of 2 research. They claim that this intrinsic motivation positively affects the learner's online study. Despite so many research related to motivation and strategies, there is one issue addressed by book, that is the lack of different participants, level of education, and also nationality. So one I found is that most of this research focus on the college level or in secondary level. Meanwhile, it's important to give wide disparity of data so that it can adjust with the learner's learning situation. In order to fill this gap, I suggest my research, which focusing on investigating the medical workers' learning motivations and strategies. And I formulate into 3 research questions. The first one is, how do the Indonesian medical workers learn English during the pandemic? And then what are their motivations that encourage them to learn English during the pandemic? And the last is, how do they employ the learning strategies to learn the language? So from this research, it aims to add more perspective in the field of teaching and learning, especially for medical workers or medical students in general. And then practically, it will be useful for English instructors and also English institutions to provide the learners with the right. Because of the time restriction and the cost, there is a delimitation of my study. So that's why the participants only include nurses and doctors. And the research is conducted in Semarang because it's easy to be accessed. Now let's move to the research method. So my research uses survey research design because it aims at finding out the participants' ideas and perceptions. And there are 63 medical workers filling out the form. So from 63 respondents, there were 4 people who continued to do the interview process. And then the instruments were adapted from Georgia and Caesar for the language learning motivation. And for the language learning strategy, I adapt from the one made by Satyajit. And the distribution of the instruments can be seen here. So the first part is the learning process. And then after that, learning motivation that consists 8 different categories. And then the next, the learning strategies that consists of 3 categories. And the last is the background information. So it's more personal. And then this research is anonymous because names is not actually important aspect of this research. And then the participants can choose whether they want to continue the interview process or not. To sum up the steps of conducting the research, so we can take a look at this diagram. So first, I prepare the initial questionnaire, which I have adapted. And then after that, I did the pilot survey. So from the pilot survey, I received some feedbacks, especially related to technical issues like how long the participants finish the survey and then the wordings of the items. And then after the revisions are identified, I revise the questionnaire and then it's finalized. And then the final questionnaire is uploaded in Google Form. And then the link is shared through different platforms, such as Twitter and then WhatsApp and also Instagram. And after all the answers are gathered, I identify the respondents who are willing to do the interview, and I do the interview. And then after all this data is collected, I do the analysis by calculating the average score for each aspect in the questionnaires. And then for the interview, I transcribe and then identify which one is relevant to the discussion. So from the data I gathered, let me show the first one. The first aspect being investigated, which is learning process. So the language program that most of the medical workers took during the pandemic is general English. And then the second major program is English for English test preparations, like TOEFL or IELTS. And the next is English for specific purposes. Most of these participants spend less than a month. So 42% of the participants spend less than a month in total to learn during the pandemic. And only 8% learn English more than 6 months. They use different kinds of media to learn. For example, social media like TikTok and Facebook. And as it's described in one of the interview by Nurse 2, so she uses Facebook and then also TikTok and some chatting platform to practice their English. And they also use video conference such as Zoom, Gmeet. And then for the method of study, this is a combination between different kind of methods, but the most frequently used is independent study and also online classes. So from that finding, there are some things that is being highlighted. So still, social media is perceived as popular media for learning English. It's the same with the previous studies. And then in my study, there is no technical issue related to technology, which is different from the one addressed by Muslimin and Haritama, because it presumably that the like all the participants live in Semarang, so technical issues such as internet and something like that is not really a big deal. But their issue is that how to manage their time, because so adult learners usually find it really hard to manage the time to study. Now let me move to the motivation. So this is the table presenting the average score of each criteria. As we can see here, the three highest motivations of medical workers is first the instrumentality promotion, which is related to their job. And then the second highest is ideal to self. This is like the learner's goal to achieve in the future. And then the next is criterion measure. This refers to the learner's initiative to learn English, to learn the language without influence by other things. And these are some of the results of the interview. So they provide the information about the family support, and then the goal to achieve career, and then to use the language for the medium to promote the product, and the learner's cultural interest. So as the name mentions that although L2 motivational self systems such as criterion measure and then OAK to self and then ideal to self can be a strong predictor for L2 learning, it is not stronger. In this case, L2 motivational self system is high, but like the strongest one is the job or promotion. And then the participants are aware that upgrading their English competence will be beneficial for their career. And also the next thing is that the medical workers as learners have own initiatives to enhance their language. And then travel and cultural experiences are the motivation that strongly encouraged from the other studies. But in this study, it is still important, but not as important as the job. And the last thing is the strategies used by the medical workers are mostly social strategies. So it includes the interaction and then collaboration with other people, the teacher, the learners. So the medical workers use social strategies. It is different from the one conducted by Sartika because the participants mostly use cognitive strategy, but in that study, the participants are high school students. And then Satyadi also claimed that deep level cognitive strategies are used in different language skills, and it refers to comprehension level. So they can arrange their own learning based on their pace, and then they can choose the subjects and use the preferred platform. And for the metacognitive, the medical workers use self-monitoring and self-correcting to learn the language. So to sum up this presentation, I'd like to give some conclusions. So based on that research, it's concluded that careers are the highest motivation for medical workers. And then using social strategies help their learning during the pandemic. The implication of that is the English instructor should arrange a program on or lesson in a way that is not only beneficial for professional setting, but also for communication outside the work. And then because social strategies are mostly used, so teachers, of course, should encourage the students to collaborate with other learners. And then my recommendation for this further study related to motivations and workers, it can, based on my data, it can be used to have the study, for example, using correlation between the length of the study in a week and then the learner's self-motivations. I think that's all from me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ida. Okay. Now, can you prepare your notes, please, Ida? Now, I would like to invite Pak Nanang. Pak Nanang, the floor is yours.
Ibu dulu, mohon maaf.
Oh, saya dulu, monggo kalau gitu.
Ibu dulu.
Baik, thank you, monggo. Okay, Ida. Okay, congratulations, Ida, for your achievement. Finally, you can sit here and defend your thesis. Okay. Now, I would like to ask you about your study, right? So you are focusing on the medical workers, right? Can you tell me what previous studies say about medical workers in relation to your study? What is your research gap in this case?
Thank you, ma'am. So it's actually hard to find a study with the medical workers as the participants, especially related to motivations and also learning strategies. Many of them, so the most of them, as I have already explained, only have the participants in mostly in university level. So I have already explained in my background of study. So most of them related to university level because so the background is usually English for specific purposes. So and the need analysis for that. But for motivations, especially in pandemic and Indonesia, so there is nothing like that.
Okay, so your research gap mostly related to the participants, right? So
Yes.
substances related to the workers in medical learning English, yes, especially in terms of motivation and learning strategy. All right. Now you have how many research questions? 3 research questions, right?
3 research questions, yes.
Okay, so what kind of instrument did you use for to answer the first research question, Ida?
The first question, I used the questionnaire.
Okay, so yes, you are asking about the learning process, right?
Yes, true.
Yes. What do you mean by learning process here?
Learning process is the aspects or the methods used by the learners. So it can be in a form of media and then the method of learning and also the length of the learners learning the language.
Did you put it in the definition of key terms about learning process, Ida?
I don't think I did. I did not put
Okay,
it.
so this is part of the key component that you are asking, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I'll add it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Now, if I look at your instrument here, right, for the learning process, yeah. So, how many questions did you have for learning process? Learning program, right?
Yeah, learning program.
Learning platform, okay. Learning media.
Media and then the length of study
The length
and
of
the length of
study
learning.
during the pandemic. Okay, and then length of learning.
English in a week.
Okay. Did you think you missed something here? Table 2.3.
Oh,
I think you are asking about the method as well, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, okay. So you missed the method here, okay, in table 2.3. Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. Yes, I think maybe you can think it over about the learning process, okay? Because a learning process, what is the learning process? Is it learning process in the classroom or learning process in what? Yeah, maybe it seems that you are asking about the what type of program? Is it general English? Is it ESP? Yeah? Is it English conversation, right?
Yeah.
And then what kind of platform? Okay, and then what kind of medium? Okay, what kind of method? Okay, and then the length, okay, in a week. Is it something to do with the characteristic of the programs?
It's so I put the learning process in the questions because
Mm-mm,
I want to relate it with the motivations
mm,
of the learners and
mm,
also mostly the strategies because strategies is like it's related to the process.
mm,
For example, I can find out like what media they use so that I can see so
mm,
their strategies. For example, if they use Facebook, do
mm,
they use it to watch
mm,
something
right,
and just copy it, like just
mm.
practicing, or they
Okay,
use it to, what is it, self-correcting or collaborating?
okay. So that would lead me to another question as well. Is it learning process inside the program or learning process? I mean, is it or is it also is it the student learning outside the classroom, yeah, in which they can do autonomous learning? Because you
Yeah,
mentioned Facebook and then
yeah.
Instagram and so on and so on. What do you think?
Yes, it covers like all methods that they use, like either it's independent study or they join the classroom or they join a community.
Okay, right. Yeah, I think and also if it is learning process, right? So you have to have the learning objectives. Yeah, what are the learning objectives here? Yeah, for example, for ESP or for English, general English, and for what is another one? Yeah,
English for test preparation,
yes,
English test
right,
preparation.
yes, right. And yeah, is it how about the assessment? Yeah, you haven't mentioned here as well related to this. Okay, think about this. Uh, Ida?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. The next one is related to the second research question, yes, which is the learning motivation. Okay. So you adopt, is it adopting or adapting?
Adapt.
Adapting. All right.
Yeah.
What kind of adaptation did you use?
So the one that is used by Satyadi and also Doni and
Mm,
Zither, those the context is for students.
mm,
So that's why I adapt it to adjust it with workers. So I change some of the, not change, it's like just
okay.
adjusting it to them.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So how many research respondents do you have?
63 in total.
63 in total. Okay. So how did you what kind of method of respondent selection did you use?
All right. So I first um use some criteria as
Mm-mm,
I have mentioned. So the nurses and
mm-mm,
doctors,
mm-mm,
and then they are the ones who are in Samarang.
mm-mm.
And then there is no limitation of how long they have been working, or like as long as, and also like they are those who work in, sorry, who learn the language within the
Okay.
pandemic time.
Okay. So did you send the consent letter from to them?
So it's not a specific consent letter, but I mentioned in my questionnaire that all of this data is like it's secret, so I will only use it for
Research purpose.
for only research purpose, and also by filling out the form, that means that they are consent to do. And then I repeat again for the interview. In one of the item, I ask them if they are consent, please give the number.
Okay. All right. So I think you need to mention the ethics as well as the research selection of the research method, yeah? Research respondent, research sampling, yeah? Okay, now look at the research of the answer of your question to the second research question, yes? You have motivation categories like criterion, ideal, L to self, ought to, and then family influence, yes? Instrumentality, prevention, and travel orientation, right? So you have the score here and the mean, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so what does the mean here tell us? Here you have
All right.
5.2, okay, 4.10,
Yeah.
and so on, yeah.
Yes. So like that mean I get it from the calculation of those scores. So after based on the respondents, so there are there are scores for each answer, and then I will calculate by adding all of the total and then divide it by 63. So I find the general average for each item.
Okay, yes, I understand. I understand that. What I'm asking is, did you have any criteria of category? Okay, so if 5.02, does it belong to, what is it, high or very high, yeah, or moderate of motivation, or what? Did you have that?
I do not put the descriptors.
Okay. So, so what is the ideal score for example, ideal self?
So I use a scale of 6.
6. So it's the
yeah,
6,
6.
yes?
6,
Yes, you
6.
can calculate from 6, yes? So maybe 5 to 6 is what? Okay, and then 4 to 5 is maybe high, or this one is very high. Okay, did you read the reference on these, how to interpret or how to categorize the response here?
Yes.
Yes, because you are asking about the learning motivation, yeah? So I think about it, okay, and then find some some criteria of category. Okay, so it is clear for the readers. So if it is 5.02 means it's very high.
All right. I'll put it.
Yeah. All right.
Yes, thank you.
Let's go to the, yes. So you have each of the category. Yeah. So what can you say? Which one is the highest? Yeah. So you can say this is the ought to, L to self, or motivation, promotion. Excuse me? Yeah. I mean, from the table 3.3, yes?
Yes.
You can see the comparison here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so if it is instrumentality or promotion is the highest one, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, all right. So why? Can you tell why?
Yes, because so that reason can be found in the result of interview. So most of the people will state that they are learning in English for their job, although they don't specifically learn English for medical purposes, but their goal is to have job promotion. Even like, for example, they take the English for preparation test, it's not specifically for communicating, but they need it for requirements.
All right. Okay. Okay, now let's go to the next questions. Okay, to answer research question 3, you use the interview, right? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Yes,
I
okay.
use questionnaires in an interview as well.
Okay, yes, sorry. Yeah, questionnaire and interview. Okay. So in the interview, you only selected how many
4 participants.
participants, right? So what is the purpose of the interview here, Ida?
All right. So the purpose of the interview is to clarify the learner's answers and to help me in describing more about the motivations and also learning stages in others, because uh, um, there are so many questions and each criteria I can only ask 3 questions. So that's why by having this, I will have like more explanations to that.
Yeah, okay. So it is an explanatory part, yeah, of the research, because you have the quantitative and then you have the interview here to explain. Is that true, Ida?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So do you think it is only survey or do you think it is can be categorized as mixed method?
It can be actually categorized by mixed method, but I think because the questionnaire is like it serves as the main data, so that's why I stated as survey method.
All right. Okay, think about it as well. All right. Now, your discussion, yes, Ida. I think you haven't really quote the theory, yes, Ida.
Yes, ma'am.
So maybe you can go back to the
Yeah.
theory of motivation, yes, especially 4.2. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, I actually have received that feedback from Bu Ani, but
Okay.
yeah,
all right.
this is the last step.
Okay. The last question is, what is your implication? You only mention about the future research, direction for future research, but you haven't really mentioned or written about the implication of your findings.
Yeah, so implications in the language learning
Yes.
is yes. So that's the instructors should encourage the learners to use uh collaborative learning because most of them
Yeah.
use social
Okay.
strategies.
Right. So based on your research findings, main research findings, yeah, Ida?
Yes.
So make it more specific. Yes. And also your limitation. Yeah. What are your limitations? You haven't mentioned. Okay. Okay,
Yes.
Ida, that's all from me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ida. And now I would like to invite partner now. Partner now. The time is there.
Thank you very much, Ibu. Thank you so much, Ida, for your presentation. So, I have some comments on your track and question. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, good. Thank you. Just a second. Okay. So for the introduction, it's okay. But then generally the gap is still needs some improvement to be convincing enough. I will be focusing on your research question here. Um, 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 I like the questions, but then it should be outlined better than this. You can improve it well better later on. So for example, the first one, how to Indonesian medical workers learning. Okay. The problem would be the same question with Nunung previously mentioned. What kind of learning? When you mentioned about learning, is it a formal learning or any kind of learning? As long as they are doing something with English, it can be called learning. So I would say that the learning definition here could be a bit misleading if you do not clarify it well. Whether this is learning, like formal learning, or language acquisition, just language acquisition, whether they just you define learning as overall learning, language acquisition. Which one is it?
This one is language acquisition.
Language acquisition, yeah. Because I heard that they learn from TikTok and so on. So
Yes,
there is a lacking of structure of like formal learning. And then what are the motivation encouraging? You can just outline it a little bit. Maybe what are their motivation of learning Indonesian, blah, 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 blah. How do, the third one would be a bit deep. I'm not sure that interview or a survey will be enough for this one, because you want to really explore how they employ this. So meaning that you will go to their learning, learning context, and you want to observe it. Probably observation would be needed for this one, not only survey. So I would suggest that you change this research question. For example, what are their motivation? That's a little bit surface question, but then it is suitable for your survey question rather than how. So this one would be difficult to what learning strategies they employ would be fine, and so on. And then some suggestion regarding the use of reference list, as well as literary using of verb tense and so on. Please check some reference list issue, verb tense. Some of them using past tense, some other using present tense, but then sometimes it need to be changed. The use of pronoun, some of them check it. For example, when you use his method referring to more than one people, here it might be a bit confusing. So please check this thing. No secondary citation like O'Malley is cited in blah, blah, blah. Use only primary citation, primary reference. And then significance of the study would be okay. Delimitation using a past tense, I think. Definition of key term, you need to improve it a little bit. For research method, I prefer for you to claim whether you want, you want to situate your research within quantitative or qualitative approach. Simply saying questionnaire-based survey research design would be okay for people who are, for example, everyone doing quantitative, but then you need to really, justify, for example, okay, you want to use survey. Why do you are using your survey? This is quantitative or qualitative?
Qualitative.
Qualitative?
Quantitative, but like
Quantitative would be,
yeah.
because the survey question is not really that deep. You use qualitative structure for describing your interview, but then for the questionnaire, I'm pretty sure that you are using some simple statistic like mean and so on. So it is better that just to claim it, whether you want to say that this is quantitative, qualitative, or mixed method. And then some here need to be explained extra. Like for example, when you say describe, they are learning something. You need. This is what I have mentioned before. Definitions of learning. What is definition of learning? Learning objective, such as mentioned by Bruno, the learning program, the structure of their learning, and so on. Because I'm not sure whether they understand what is general English, what is English for specific purpose, and so on. So you need to clarify this thing. This question, how do you think your research design can address your research objective and the context of your data? How do you do that?
Sorry, sir. Could you please repeat the question?
How your survey-based design can address your data as well as your context of your data. So the context of your data would be people who are really busy and they are working in many different medical institutions in Semarang. How do you address it using the survey? Why do you use survey?
Yeah. So So the context is using the background of the participants that I find, like the doctors and then the nurse, and then how long they are working, and then like what kind of program they took. So I can relate that, like why this specific criteria choose
Okay.
choose certain programs or
Okay.
have certain motivation.
Okay. So also you need to discuss here in your research method, you need to discuss a little bit about how do you guarantee the reliability and validity of your research. I put it here, I think somewhere here. Okay. How do you guarantee the validity and reliability of your research? Your instrument, your method, your data. So because your survey would be having some limitation, how do you limit those things? So regarding the sample and population, I have comment here. Just a second. Oh, this one. What is the rationale behind limiting the inclusion of participants to those learning English from March 2020 until
Right.
present?
Yes.
What is it?
So that means like the present time is like the time when I collect the data. And
then
I didn't mention the specific time, so I will mention the specific month of that.
Okay, as well as this one, how do you ensure that the participants here having certain, various English proficiency? I'm not sure because you don't mention it in your results, their English proficiency. Did you mention it
No,
somewhere?
I don't.
Okay, so do you classify their English proficiency or not?
No.
Okay. So meaning that you cannot mention that from various English
Yes.
proficiency, just assuming that everyone from this age until this age who are working as a medical worker could be, could be used as data, and because you do not clarify it. And this one, sorry, one more. Regarding the sample, you have 7,000 people, and then from this 7,000, you selected 63 medical workers. Do you have any rationale why you choose 63?
Actually, that number, 70,000 something, is not. It's the total of the medical workers in Semarang.
Okay.
But then, like one of my criteria is like the medical workers who are learning English during the pandemic, and that total is unknown. So, because of that, I do not set the certain target of like how many participants, especially because I set only 2 to 3 weeks to collect the data, and I have already reached out to some institutions and like the medical workers to fill it, and I get that number.
Okay. I think we need to somehow revise it a little bit, because when you mentioned that you have 7,000 and then another 63 people here, seems like there is a sampling model used here. But in fact, you do not sample them, right? You just send the survey to whoever you can have reach.
Yes,
How many people did you try to reach?
There's as many people I try to, because I also like put it in some platforms, and then like some like some social media sharing too.
Okay. And how do you ensure that people who fill out your questionnaire is Indonesian medical worker?
Because in my survey I put the institution, so I can check, and also like so I put the criteria in the beginning so that they know like whether they belong to this or not, and I mentioned like those criteria, including like working in medical institution and they work in Semarang. And then in the last background of my questionnaire, I feel they have to fill their institutions so I can check it and like where they live.
Okay. So I would suggest that here you mentioned, for example, you have this data that the number of people, 7,000 something, and then you try to reach this much people, for example, 200, 300 people, and then 63 people respond your questionnaire. That will be quite acceptable. So you need to mention it. If not, people will assume that this is kind of sampling methods. But then if you try to sample it from this much people, you need to have rationale why you have statistical considerations such as this statistical consideration to decide the 63 people. So
Yes.
just structure a little bit, change it, this one. Okay. And then since we are talking about language studies, probably you need also to mention English English skills if possible. I'm not sure how, but then maybe you can just generally assume that they have like this much. Probably you can check, for example, in their application or requirement to be general practitioner or specialist or nurse. Is there any language, requirements? If yes, you can use that. Generally, they have this kind of TOEFL or something. Probably.
Yes.
Yep. And then also this one is a bit interesting for me. They are learning English, but then why do you translate your survey into Indonesian? You try to say it here that you want to help them comprehend the statement well. But then I think this is not enough reasons. What could be other reasons?
Well, because I assume that the participants that fill out the surveys come from different language levels, so they might not be able to comprehend the questions in like when I adapt it like directly from the source. So to
Okay.
avoid that misinterpretation of something like that, so I translated into Indonesia.
Okay. Feedback about findings and discussion. Here, um, I have some comments on your discussion. Sorry, just a second. Here, since you include pandemic as variable, how did the pandemic impact the language learning strategies of modern medical worker? Can you explain a little bit here? What is the impact of the pandemic?
Yeah, especially in how they learn the language. So yeah, I will add the comparison before the pandemic, but as I have mentioned earlier, the one that I can find is like before the pandemic with the student as participants, but for the workers, specifically medical workers, I couldn't find it. But the impact of their learning is that they mostly use independent study and online learning,
Okay.
and yeah, they have more time to practice the language.
Okay. And some aspects like in discussion, it's still lacking like engagement with previous empirical studies. So you need to add this one. Not only resources from other study, other references, but also empirical studies.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Just a second. I think I still have here. Oh, ini. Apa ini? You also mentioned about technology here, and then did the availability of technology would influence their language motivation and language strategies? Did you discuss that?
No.
No, okay.
No, I
Probably
don't
you
connect
need
it
to
to that.
mention it, right?
All right.
You need to connect it with the use of technology, TikTok, and so on, because you
Mm.
already mentioned it in your presentation generally. What specific language learning strategies were most commonly used? Did you use that,
The
discuss that?
strategies is social strategies.
Social strategies, okay. And then is there any differences between doctor and nurses and support staff?
Uh, mm, no, I didn't put that
Okay, so
differentiation.
could be I'm interested to see, since you mentioned doctor and nurse, and you can identify them as two different groups, probably there is differences. There is difference, or there are differences among both groups. But here you mentioned you put them together, so it might be a bit different if discussed separately. Okay. I think for the conclusion, you mentioned one of the limitation here, regarding 2 weeks something and so on. What could be generally the impact of that limitation to your study?
So I learned that because of the limited time, so the impact is just I only have a few participants compared to like general assumption of people that survey should have like bigger number of participants.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that is related to that.
Yep. Sorry, another question. When did you share your survey?
It was it's around August.
August, what year?
Last year.
Last year on August. Okay. Yeah, and also implication. I couldn't see really enough discussion on the implication. But these are generally my comment and feedback. I will send it to you later on.
Thank you
Itu
very much,
saja,
sir.
Bu Nunu, Pak Yudi, dan Bu Ani. Matur nuwun.
Thank you, Pak Nanang. Now I would like to invite Ibu Dr. Ani Nono. The floor is
Thank
yours.
you, Bu Nunung. Thank you. Ida, first of all, congratulations. But I have not a few, some questions and also comments that I need contribution from you. Okay, right. Ida, I think I have the same point related with the, what is it? The keyword, Ida, the keyword. Yeah, I was asking like actually language program that you are talking about, what is that? And then Bu Nunung was asking about language learning, what is that, right? And then I also want to know actually what you mean by pandemic. Could you provide an explanation? Because your title talks about this. So your title mentioned Indonesian medical workers' motivation and strategies in learning English during the pandemic. So what do you mean by pandemic here? Could you provide exact time or exact date? Yes, please.
Pandemic is the emergency situations caused by COVID 2016, which is confirmed by WHO, which was around March 2020 to just recently removed. So, but
And just
but
recently
that
is when?
if the context is the study, so like that's when the data collection was conducted. But the general definition of pandemic, like the timeline is between March 2020 until I think it's just this year, ma'am, but I cannot remember what month.
Okay. So that's the issue, Ida. I mean, I get this idea after talking with someone. Don't you think that it is actually quite impossible for the teachers and also nurse or the medical practitioners to do the learning of English while they are on a pandemic situation? I mean, they are in a very hectic situation. They have to go to the hospital, okay? And then they have to take care of the patients, and then they have to take care of themselves. So actually, what do you mean by learning English over there during the pandemic? Because in my opinion, it is impossible to happen. What do you think about that?
So I guess I can find it from the interview that I had. Like, so although the pandemic, like everyone seems to be busy, especially like these medical workers. Like I find that they still have the time. They can manage the time for studying because, for example, some of them have some of them are still taking in some kind of like level for promotion and to get into that, or like for their thesis or something like that. So they need to learn English for specific purposes. English test preparation, for example. And then also, like if what people assume by learning is only attending online class, that's why suggestion from Pak Anang and Bu Nunung is correct, because what I mean by learning is like any independent studies, like the language acquisition. It's not like they have to attend the classes formally, but any method they do to acquire the language.
Right. So once again, it means that my question also confirms Pak Nanang and also Bu Nunung's concern, where your background or your what is it the background of the study is not clear enough. What you mean by learning, you did not also discuss. And when you mention about language program, it is also not clear. When you are talking about pandemic, it is also not clear. So what I'm trying to say is that you have to make it clear so that readers will understand your situation, so that people will not say that, just like what I said previously, that it is impossible to do that. Is it online? Is it offline? I mean, is it impossible? Because we do not know, and you do not provide enough or sufficient explanation about that. Okay, right, that's the first. The second, still related with your background of the study, till chapter 1, Bu Nunung also asked you about research gap, right? Did you particularly mention that there has been studied on these issues, but there hasn't enough coverage on this one? Have you?
Mostly I focus on the gap in filling the gap of participants.
Yeah, so it is not only about the participant, right? But you are talking about language learning, etc., etc. So it has to be clear. So that is why my next question is related with the research question, because in my opinion, then if your background are just like that, then your research question sounds like it's coming out from nowhere. Okay, coming out from nowhere, because it does not really relate from your background, because background is usually provide something like this, why your topic needs to be done, okay, and then your argument, okay, and that is why you want to do this, because there are some gaps, and then you want to, but your research question sounds like they come out of nowhere, so it has to be linked. Jadi kalau memang seperti itu ya, backgroundnya harus disesuaikan gitu. Ya. Okay. And now you have 3 questions. Let's say number 1, how will you answer questions number 1? If I ask you, Ida, how do Indonesian medical workers learn English during the pandemic? Can you answer that directly without looking at your notes, based on your the data that you have written, and also you remember, how do Indonesian medical workers learn English during the pandemic?
So they learn English using different methods. For example, combining different use of medias like social media, video, and also video conference. And they do independent study or attending online classes within certain length of time for learning.
Okay, right. Okay, good. And did you particularly also talk about that in your findings?
About the length?
The answer of the first question.
Not that.
Did you? Yeah, okay, right. So that's also related with your finding. And I don't know whether question number 1 is relevant or not, because your title is only talking about motivation and strategies. So question number 1 is not even mentioned on the what is it on the title, or not implied on the title. Okay, but if you insist on discussing that, okay, you have to if you already have the research questions, then you have to discuss it. And that's also my suggestion for your finding. Okay, your finding, is it organized? Your findings are organized based on the research questions or based on your data collection procedure?
It's based on the research question, ma'am.
Okay, look again. If you mention that it is based on your research questions, let's take a look at your answer finding. 3.1, learning process of Indonesian medical workers during the pandemic. What was your question? How do Indonesian medical workers learn English during the pandemic? Is 3.1 answering your first question? Tanyanya how dulu ya. And your answer is learning process of Indonesian medical workers during the pandemic.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
How the Indonesian.
I mean, yeah, it's okay with the research questions, for example. Then you have to arrange that in such a way so that your finding will answer the research question. Okay, so I mean, you don't have to, omit or not, but just try to make it more readable for the reader. Okay, okay. So talking about the findings, now let's talk about the discussion. Now let's have a big picture, Ida. What are 3 important findings from your study, Ida? Yeah, 3 or 4 or 5, it's okay, but just say, if I ask you 3, could you mention at least 3 important findings of your study? What are they?
The first is the highest motivation of the learners is instrumentality promotion.
And then
most of the medical workers use social strategies to learn a language.
And third?
And then the medical workers use different platforms during their learning.
Okay, right. So, yeah, say you have these 3, yeah. Perhaps you have more than 3. Say you have these 3. I have on my mind is that on chapter 4, you do not repeat the same order like the one in chapter 3, but rather you are talking about your 3 or 4 most important findings, and then you discuss it. So you do not repeat again, like chapter 3, finding 3.1, learning process, and then chapter 4, discussion 4.1, learning process of Indonesian medical workers. So, it's not interesting.
I learned from the previous thesis.
Yeah, no,
I never learned about that kind of order.
Yeah, I know. Kebanyakan memang contohnya seperti itu ya.
Yeah.
But you do not discuss with Pak Yudi and also Bu Ani, so that is why we cannot suggest you how to do the discussion.
Yes,
but yeah, so that's some idea for you to think about. Yeah. Okay, right. And then another thing, apa ya yang saya ini? Ya, tentang tanggal, tentang jumlah peserta, itu saya kira it is very important to be mentioned. Nah, karena kamu kan bilangnya cuma March 2020 until the present lah. Present itu kan present kamu nulis, present kamu menyajikan kan beda. We do not know. It is a very big criteria. So you have to make it clear for the. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. I will define it specific.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Specific. Yeah. And then another thing. What can you conclude from your in chapter 3, Ida? You need to make a kind of conclusion. So you have finding A, B, C, D, E, F, G, for example. So what are the conclusions? Okay. Are your research questions answered well or not? Okay, and then you go
Yes.
to the discussion. On the discussion, okay, that I think Pak Nanang has given you a suggestion, yeah, how to improve. The conclusion, I have the same suggestion with Bu Nunu, that on the conclusion you do not only summarize that, but you are talking about the implication, the limitation of your study, and also the suggestion. Coba langsung aja kita lihat ke halaman 44. 5.2, recommendation for future research. Are you with me, Ida?
Yes, yes.
Okay, let's take a look at the first sentence, the very first sentence. Given that the study's data collection procedures required only 2 weeks for participants to complete the questionnaire, nggak jelas juga ya 2 weeks-nya itu kapan, harusnya jelas di depan. The further study can be explored using a greater number of participants. Coba dipikir-pikir, itu logika kalimatnya benar atau enggak?
Yes.
Pengumpulan data cuma 2 minggu oleh partisipan, sehingga ke depannya penelitian itu harus dengan jumlah partisipan yang lebih banyak. Logikanya ketemu enggak?
No.
Enggak ketemu. Enggak. Karena kalau prosedurnya itu cuma 2 minggu, seharusnya misalnya further study-nya itu mungkin lebih lama, begitu kan pengumpulan datanya. Oh, kok bisanya di sini pengumpulan datanya 2 minggu, kok jumlah orangnya yang harus ditambah, gitu, nggak nyambung. Gitu. Okay? Right. So, I think the same ideas also goes to some other sentences somewhere in your thesis. I have made some notes actually. Okay, so what I want to say is that the recommendation needs to be based on the findings of your study. Okay, ya kalau memang seperti ini ya, gimana yang baik? Okay, and then you also have that one. Another suggestion of future research is using the existing data of the study and applying different research methodology. Dari mana kamu dapat ide seperti itu? Paragraf kedua.
Just to think about like the data that I have, like maybe they're using different approach, but using the same data.
Why we need to do that? Why?
So that is, like by using these correlations, we can find it like whether like the, for example, like the length of the study is related to something.
Okay, if it is the length of the study, it's the length of the study, not about the research methodology, you know, like making correlation or some other things. I think it wouldn't be relevant. Okay, jadi harus relevasinya harus. Okay, and I think another suggestion, jangan lupa memasukkan acknowledgement for the examiners. And I still cannot find your CV here on the draft, so please complete with that. Okay.
Yes,
I think that's
thank
all.
you.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, Pak Yudi, Bu Nunung, Pak Nana. Thank you.
Thank you, Bu Anox. Now I would like to invite Pak Prof. Yudi.
Thank you very much, Bu Nunung. Okay, we have got a lot of suggestions, and comments from Bu Nunung, Pak Manang, and Bu Anu.
Pak Yudi, I think you are freezing.
Freezing?
No, it's okay.
Oh, all right. Would you please have a look at table 3.1? In table 3.1, you can see that, yeah, this is to describe the how, how the medical workers learn English. Now, the answer of this how is the titles of the programming, and then the length of the duration, I mean the duration of the learning. And what I would like to see is, in fact, we have a lot of varieties here among one with the number of the respondents, which are many, and then we have a lot of different answers, and some of them look at the length of learning during the pandemic, less than 1 month. Yeah. What do you think about less than 1 month?
Yes. Yes, sir. So less than 1 month means like the total of their learning, like starting from starting when they begin, and then like it's a kind of like the average of how long they learn it.
And there are 26 participants, respondents, who only
Yes.
studied in less than 1 month.
Yeah.
Was that because of your survey, or they really did the learning process? Because and if I look at the answers of the questions, when they study through social media, by reading, by anything, it's not really under studying, not really under the supervisions of others or something, but this is their own efforts in trying to find English exposure opportunities so that they will be able to answer your questions. Okay, in that case, is there any of the respondents who did not experience the learning when you collected the data?
No, sir, because it's one of the criteria is stating clearly that they learn English during the pandemic.
Or meaning that all of the respondents felt that they are eligible to join the survey because they have learned, even though it is less than 1 month. Yeah. So during the pandemic. All right then. Now look at table 3.5. I wonder why social strategies was the dominant strategy that they did in your analysis.
Yeah, so actually like like social strategies related to strategies using interaction and collaborative with other learners, but learners itself, like it's not specifically like their friends in their program, but like it can be like family, like using communicating with family or coworkers using English, because in if you can take a look at the attachment, so there are some questions related to that, and then I need to open. So it describes some of the strategies. For example, I practice it with friend, teacher, or native speaker, and then also I ask someone to correct when I speak. That means like that includes in that. So I think it makes sense, because like although like they learn it independently, they will use it somehow, either to tag someone or sorry.
Okay, that is good. And in your suggestions, do you have any suggestions for future participants when they are going to take to take English learning, then what
Okay.
kind of suggestions based on your study in terms of the length of the study time and also in terms of the strategy?
So yeah, I didn't write it down in that for the
Yeah, I
did you
think
say
you need to
future
write
learning?
questions related to your findings.
Yeah, so the future medical workers, I think they can use similar strategies like using social media and like trying to communicate with others. And then well it is so one of the things that I noticed is like I thought like most of them will learn something related to their job, but actually they learn general English. So I assume that it's because not so many places provide the material or like specific English for specific purpose. And I have I have been working in like institution like, and it's so rare to find something like that, except that you want a private class. It's
Okay.
possible, but no.
Yeah, so you can emphasize that then. Yeah. And then with the transformation of the context of learning from online to face-to-face again, what do you think? Do you think that their strategy might change and also their the way they learn, the motivation would change? Maybe now we are in the positions of the post-pandemic era, yeah, where people are getting close again and also they have the face-to-face mode of learning.
I think most likely it will change the way they learn, like the learning process. So because we are allowed to meet in person, I cannot mention specific like data related to this, but I think learners prefer to have offline, like in-person classes rather than online. That's why nowadays the many demands for offline classes.
Yeah, perhaps for future researchers, you can recommend that they are going to do the same focus of study, but during the post-pandemic, maybe the results will be in some way different from what you have found, and this will be interesting as a comparison. So you need to add one more recommendation for future researchers, I guess.
All right. Sure.
All right. So that's from me. Thank you very much, Bu Nunu.
Thank you, Pak Yudi. Now we would like to discuss our results. So Ida, can you please wait in the waiting room? Pak Nanang, please.
Yes, thank you.
In the breakout room.
In the
Silakan.
background. Okay, thank you very much, Bapak Ibu examiners.
Yeah.
Sesungguhnya pekerjaannya lumayan bagus juga, kalau menurut saya.
Yeah,
Saya sebagai penguji, tapi mungkin ada hal-hal lain yang mungkin diperhatikan juga ya, karena ini sudah last minute, mungkin apa namanya, masa studinya sudah mepet dan lain sebagainya ya. Sebetulnya dia deserve mendapatkan bulat ya, tetapi kalau karena ada hal-hal yang seperti ya itu tadi terlalu mepet dan terlalu banyak menunda begitu, mungkin ya ada hal-hal yang perlu diperhatikan. Menurut Bapak Ibu bagaimana, apakah?
Ya. Monggo saya catat.
Jangan di record Pak Nanang.
Oh, Supen, mohon maaf.